Hey friends, this is David Lawrence from the Scrum of the Earth podcast. You're watching the Jacks Rangers show. Huzzah!
Huzzah, Rangers. This is Phil Harris again here at the Jacks Rangers show. I've got a very special guest this time around. Joining us from DC, his name is John Fitzpatrick. He is the curator. He is the founder of Rugby Morning. John, how the hell are you?
Doing great, Phil. How you doing?
Not too bad, my brother. Very happy to be here with you. Tell us where you're from.
Sure. So I was born and raised in the good old state of Maryland, originally Hyattsville, Maryland, which is in Prince George's County, which is just east of Washington, D.C.
Nice.
And D.C. is where my wife and 3 kids, we live right now. So we're just living the dream here in the capital city.
Very cool, man. Very cool. So I got recruited to play at Maryland, but I decided to go to South Carolina instead. I really enjoyed my time there visiting Maryland, but decided to go stay home in South Carolina.
Maryland's got a good program. We played them. I went to American University and we played Maryland. They have a couple of sides, but we always enjoyed going down to College Park. They always had a good time, and it was a fun little drink up afterwards.
Is that where your origin story starts with rugby in college? Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right, like a good majority of players in the U.S., it started in college. Like rugby found me there. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school. I have a twin brother, so I had a natural competitor, and we played football, we wrestled, and played lacrosse. And post high school, when I was looking at colleges, I was kind of like thinking about, hey, maybe I'll try and play Division III lacrosse, but my heart just wasn't in it.
Yeah.
I ended up staying local. Went to American University, which is really funny. Sidebar. I studied abroad in Australia, and when talking with foreign students, they would ask you, "Hey, like, where'd you go to college?" And I would say American University. And they're like, "Yeah, we know. Which one?" And I would go, "Well, American University."
That's hilarious.
So they didn't like me too much, but I wanted to do something competitive. I still wanted to play sports. There wasn't a club lacrosse team at the time at American, and I was just surfing the club sports homepage, and it said Men's Club Rugby, oldest active continuous club sport on campus. And I was like, what is rugby? Went on YouTube, saw a couple of videos of dudes just getting racked and some guys sidestepping, and I was like, holy moly, where's this been all my life?
Right.
So there wasn't even like a table on campus. I just went to the first practice and fell in love, and I was hooked ever since. And looking back on it, my brother never played the sport, but he would have been perfect for it. His nickname in high school was Captain Furious, because me and my brother were not the biggest guys, but like we played football. And when I say we played football, I suited up, I warmed the bench, and I played special teams. My brother played a little bit more than I did, but we weren't suited for football. Rugby, we should have been on a rugby pitch playing scrum half or fly half or wing or full back, playing something competitive and fun. And while I enjoyed playing high school football, I wish I would have played rugby when I was 5 or 6 years old. I wish I would have had a ball in my hand at that time. So, which is now, it's funny because actually now I help coach I've got 3 kids. My 2 oldest are 6 and 4, and I help coach their touch team. I'm like, hey, we're going to get a ball in their hands at a young age. We're gonna make this happen. So
perfect. Yeah, that's great. Tell us what Rugby Morning is, and how did you get started with it?
Yeah, it grew out of during the pandemic. I was just kind of bored, and like most people, they were like, you got a couple extra hours on hand, being home all the time, and it kind of grew out of the idea that sometimes it's not the easiest to be a fan of rugby in the U.S., right? Like you really have to be dedicated to search the blogs or go on social media or, watch a pirated video to watch some top 14 action or something like that. Right. So, I just thought there would be a way to, or you just can't keep on it because you don't have enough time in the day. So why not try and curate some of the news that's out there, from men's and women's college rugby to MLR, right? To men's and women's Eagles. Put it all together, make it bite-sized, quick and easy, so that, hey, if you're busy one day and you're not on social, you can wake up the next morning, it takes you 5 minutes, you can feel like you're informed and know what's going on. And just started putting it together. And I tell you, it's been a lot of fun because it's led me to, being on podcasts like this. A year ago, I wasn't going to be talking to the Free Jacks, no offense, but an Old Glory fan, but here we are. So yeah, it's been great. I've loved it.
That's awesome, man. So happy that you started this. I really enjoy it. We'll talk about it a little bit more further into the episode, but I'm a big fan. I tell everybody now, like, you got to sign up for this.
Love it.
And so you're obviously a DC fan. Old Glory DC is playing right now. So
It's ugly right now, Phil.
yeah, it's tough. It's tough. But where does your passion from DC come from? Is it just because it's the hometown team?
Yeah, for sure. It started there. Definitely a homer for the DC sports teams, for all of them. And we had a couple of years there where the Capitals won the Stanley Cup, and then the Nationals won the World Series. We're not going to talk about the Commanders, but
Yeah.
but yeah, it's kind of started from there. So when MLR announced that DC was going to get a team, I was really excited, particularly because who was involved with the team, which I really liked the local roots there, from Dunleavy and Sheehy, because Sheehy went to Gonzaga College High School, which is here in Washington, D.C. It's actually kind of a local rugby powerhouse. My dad went to Gonzaga High School way back in the late 60s or so, I think before Sheehy's time. So there is a connection with my family to Gonzaga High School, and it's not far from where I live now. I run past it every now and then, but and I really like what Old Glory is doing in terms of how they're building that organization. There feels like there's a lot of stability there. They're not going to make a drastic change, which I think is good right now, because certainly they've got some growing pains. But it's actually really funny. When Old Glory announced that they were going to have a team, they had a few open tryouts, like regionally throughout the country. And I turned to my wife and I was like, "Hey, Amy, look, it's $50. I mean, this is going to be like my last, like, whatever, you know."
Yeah.
I basically asked her if I could go out and try out for the team. She was like, "Yeah, just don't get hurt." So it was funny. I treated it like a job interview. So the night before I shaved, because I wanted to look clean shaven, not so much to make a good impression, but because I wanted to look younger, because I was definitely 5 or 6, 7 years older than most of the guys out there. And I had a lot of grays and whites in the beard. So I figured, hey, if I shave, I'll look younger. All they had to do was look at the stat sheet and be like, a 35-year-old scrum half, fly half who hasn't played competitively in 10 years. It was fun. I had a blast. It was a miserably cold day. But if anyone from Old Glory DC is watching this, I would love to see if they still have the scouting report. If they didn't throw it away immediately, if they kept it, I'd love to be able to hear what they said. I can take it if it was terrible, but got a jersey out of it, but it was a lot of fun. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm sure they underlined experienced a couple times. That's great. So I want to be a little harsh with DC for just a second, because and this is honest to God, Sean, sometimes I forget that they're in the league and I'm not even playing around. What is the identity of Old Glory DC? Who is this team?
You know what? It's a really good question. I think right now it's kind of a question mark. I think the identity of this team is that, not to say that they don't have one, but they're a young team, and they are replacing a lot of key components from last year. Their entire front row has left, and they all went to overseas, which is great to see.
Yeah.
But they're a young squad, right? Jason Robertson, their fly half last year, was dynamic. He had quite the duo with Danny Tusitala. Now, Danny's still there, and I think he has to be the focal point of the offense right now, because there's a couple other pieces, but losing Robertson hurt. Losing Mungo Mason hurt. Those are big names. It's tough to replace those. And I think what was interesting was that when DC first came in the league, man, they came out of the gates, they were on fire. I mean, they were having a great year. Obviously, COVID happened, shut things down. Coming back the next year, just growing pains there. Trying to recapture that magic from that first season. So when I look at Old Glory DC, I overall, again, and take a step back from week one, right? You look at that score line. If you just look at the stat sheet, you saw 56-22. You're thinking, oof, these guys got clobbered.
Right.
And while, they did get beat by a lot, at one point in the game, it was in the 57th minute, Old Glory scored. They were down 5 points. But then the last 20 minutes, they just got kind of run out, and you kind of expect that from the Eastern Conference champs, Rugby ATL, and they had a great game, and they're about to score right now, I think, against Nola Star. I got the game up over here. But it's a young team. They've got a couple of pieces who I think they can score, but again, I go back to, this is an organization with stability in the sense that they're not going to make drastic changes, right? The coach has been there for a bit. I think they want to continue to build. They've got some good young local players that have come up that are trying to develop. I just think, I think patience might be the word.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
Fair. Nothing wrong with that. A slow build is perfectly fine. I mean, if your fan base is okay and is patient, that's perfectly fine. If the end result is winning a lot of games, and it's no big deal, right?
They play in a great facility. Segra Field is great. It's a little outside of DC. Building a great fan base. I think there's a good community of rugby in the DC area. I just think, I think DC sports fans are comfortable with giving our professional sports teams a little bit of time.
All right. You were talking about how they really lost the game in the last 20 minutes last week. I keep hearing there's depth issues with DC, and it's kind of glaring. Do you buy into that at all?
I do a little bit, because I think, and DC's playing right now, Mike Dabulus, who was penciled in as their fly half, USA Eagle. He got hurt in the game. So he's not playing against Nola Gold. Hopefully he's back against Free Jacks game, and I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But so they've got a couple of other pieces that they've started to bring in right now. William, I'm gonna struggle on his name. It's like Talania. He's a good player, but he's a player that I don't think too many people know about necessarily, right? So they got to plug him in now, who they just picked up in the off season. We talked about the front row that they had to replace entirely. Dante Lepresti, young guy who only had 2 or 3 starts last year for them. Every team's going to have injuries, right? Like that can't be an excuse, So what's the game plan? How do you build around that? I think depth's going to be an issue for DC, and I think ultimately what you're going to see is there's going to be some guys that are going to have to step up, right? They're going to have to continue to find Danny Tusitala to get the ball out. They're going to have to continue to get Palamo involved because he's a great player. So I think depth's a big issue, and I think it's going to be an interesting season.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're in for a roller coaster for sure here. What do they do well, and what do they need to improve to win this game against the Free Jacks?
They play pretty well at home. They beat New England last year at home. And then they turned around a couple of weeks later, and that was a really exciting game up there that they lost by 3. They play well at home. I think they like playing at Segra Field. How are they going to beat? Well, I'll tell you what. DC got fortunate. I shouldn't say fortunate. New England got a bad deal with the Dougie Fife suspension. That was kind of crummy. So he's out for 3 games. So I think I'm not quite answering the question the way you want me to answer it, but I'm going to answer it this way.
All right.
I think they know that the offense is being run through Bowden, who is a dynamic playmaker, right? They're just going to have to pressure the crap out of him. They're just going to have to hound him.
Yep.
And then I think they're going to have to find, there's a couple of centers that I like for Old Glory. There's this guy, Junior Sow. He's a rugby league convert. He's 35. He's a little bit up there. Good player. I don't think too many folks know about him, at least in the MLR. I think he could be a question mark, but he's exciting. He's a bruising runner, hard tackler. I think he's fun to watch. If they can get him involved in the centers, keep New England off balance a little bit. We talked about Danny. That's obvious. Palamo, if he can run through some folks, but Robert Sanada out there on the wing, if they can find him in space and get him running with the ball to keep possession off of New England, I think that's how they win this game. I mean, I think the only way Old Glory wins this game if they keep it close. Because again, if Mike Dabulus isn't playing, he's a great young player. I really like him, but if he's out again, then they're going to have to find other ways to try and score the ball.
I mean, this could be a team that is 0-2 coming into this game. They could be very desperate for a win, so who knows? And as you were saying, this is a team that beat my New England Free Jacks at home down there in DC last season. And that was actually the first recording that we did as the Jacks Rangers show. It was after that game. I remember telling people on the Facebook group, I was like, this team needs people yelling in their faces at halftime because the Free Jacks played like crap in that first half. They looked awful. So, I mean, if DC can kind of get lucky and the Free Jacks are off of their game in the first half, maybe they can take control of the game and never look back. I don't know if that's what's going to happen. I would kind of guess towards no, but we'll have to see. You've mentioned a couple of guys. I know there's big names on DC that people already probably know, because one is a legendary USA Eagle. The other one's kind of a star in the league at scrum half. But is there, other than those two guys, perhaps the people that the Free Jacks should be, or Free Jacks fans should be aware of? Who's the danger man on DC?
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny you say, to go back to your original point about, I think Old Glory will be 0-2 going into this game. They're already down 36-0 to Austin. So I think that could potentially, and there's still about 10 minutes left in the first half, that could potentially play in Old Glory's favor if they're staring down 0-3. They're at home. They don't want to do it. Backs against the wall. A must-win game this early in the season. Why not? Or the season completely goes off the rails. So, but to answer your question, another big name that I think probably folks, Free Jack fans are familiar, particularly if you're a USA Rugby fan, is the 8-man Jameson Schultz. He's a great player. I think everyone knows about him. I talked a little bit about Junior Sal, again, rugby league guy who I think, I keep bringing him up. I watched a preseason game and I watched some of his rugby league stuff, and I wrote rugby league that's a little loosey-goosey over there with tackles and stuff. Right. But bruising runner, hard tackler, and interesting to watch him play. Now, I mentioned the other guy, William. What is this? I'm mispronouncing his name, and I apologize. But he was plugged in at fly half for today, and I was hoping to watch to see how he would do, because he was teammates with Danny Tusitala back in their younger days. So you would think that familiarity between the 9 and 10 would help spark some magic, but it's not looking the case right now in this Austin game. So I keep poking over there. But
it's hard to look away. It's like a car wreck, right?
It is a bit of a car wreck. A couple other names that I like, a couple of young players that they're starting to bring up. Again, I mentioned Dante Lepresti. He's a local kid who's coming up, who I really like. They've got another prop, Jack Iscaro, that I really like. He's a Gonzaga high school boy, big kid. I think they're really high on him. So. And I think it's developing that young talent. I don't think they'll be household names this year, but in a couple of years, if they continue to grow, potentially.
What's wild is the Free Jacks are kind of taking the same approach. Our back line is like on average is 24 years old, and then our pack is like 22 is the average age. It's incredible. So they've definitely invested in youth. They're not one of these teams that are bringing in all these old guys that are like our age, having their final hurrah. So yeah, it's great to see the investment in youth. I mean, that's what's good. That's the future, right? So hopefully, in a couple of years, these guys will develop into great players in MLR for the future. Yeah. Let's talk.
I think. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, who has the best hair on DC?
It's a great question. I mean, without a doubt, I think New England probably has some of the players have some of the best hair. I think there's at least a few guys who can make the MLR all hair team there in New England, but. Danny Tusitala, he's got, the dyed hair thing going on. I think Don Bailey's got a little bit of thing up top. I respect Mo Katz and the old bald look. That's a good look to pull off. But I think hands down, it's got to be Threaten Palamo. He's got that head and shoulders Troy Polamalu look going on. You know what I mean? When he's running and it's flapping back behind him, hopefully leaving defenders in his wake. Such a great look. So I'm gonna go with Threaten.
Yeah, he's a living legend, man. Like he's one of the youngest players to ever play in the World Cup. It's incredible.
Funny story about him, and this goes back to just how I think they're doing a good job of building up rugby in the DC community. There's a group that gets together and plays touch down on the National Mall, where like the Washington Monument and Lincoln Memorial, because there's a lot of big green open space there. Yeah. And before the Old Glory had become a team, and even as they were starting to in that first season, I would go down and play on Saturdays before kids and all that stuff. But Thread would come out and play.
That's awesome.
And he would just, I guess he was just running around just to get a little bit of cardio and stuff. And, he was clearly just so much better than everyone. And everyone knew it. And they knew who he was. Yeah. But even when he wasn't taking it so seriously, you could tell like the skill level that he had, just the way he moved the ball, his steps. You were like, man, this guy's something good. Yeah. And it was cool because a lot of the folks now go to the games and they can say, hey, we played touch with him, you know what I mean? So like stuff like that, I think what is great about the rugby community here in DC.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk real quick about hatred. Who do you dislike in MLR and why? Are you one of these guys that's like, no, I'm just happy to have the league here. I don't hate any of the teams. Let's not say hate. Let's say dislike. That's
Okay. Yeah. I'll put, it's funny you say that. I was going to put my rugby morning cap on first and say, actually, I love all the teams. But now that you put it that way, honestly, I think, you got to tap into the rivalries between the cities, right, that are already existing between, I'm not going to put Washington in that yet, but obviously between New York and Boston, that is so awesome. That's such a great rivalry, right? You insert DC in there, eventually at some point, potentially Philly. I imagine they're going to get an MLR team, right? And you build off the sports rivalry that it's already exists between those teams, between those fan bases, and then you had a sport like rugby where they're hitting each other. I mean, come on, it's a great atmosphere for some fun stuff. So I'll answer your question. I think it's easy for a fan to. I think with the LA Giltinis, there's a spectrum. You either love them or you hate them. You love them because they're flashy and they've got these Australian talent, or you hate them because that's what everyone wants to talk about. You know what I mean? They got pink and white uniforms. It's so LA. It's like, come on. They're bringing on all these big name players, and their fans arrive 20 minutes late and they leave 20 minutes early, like, typical LA sports fans. So when Houston knocked them off last week, I got to say I was really happy about that.
Me too. Yeah, they're the evil empire, my friend. I can't stand them, and I'm kind of like a Houston homer on the western side of things.
Okay,
got a lot of family from there. Been there a couple times, not to the actual rugby specific stadium, but I really enjoy the city of Houston. What were you gonna say?
I was going to say, not necessarily dislike, but I have a bone to pick with you in New England. I was going over the MLR's website, and I happened to look at the trade tracker, which is great.
Okay.
On the left of the trade tracker, they have the international player slot, and I was taking a look at it. Explain to me, Phil, why, and I know New England's got they're developing a lot of great American talent, but New England and New York, they have the most international players on the roster. So explain that to me, Phil. What's going there?
We're going for it. We're going for the Shield this year. I think TK looked at that first game and he's looked at the roster that he has assembled and said, let's go for it.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I think they have 12 at this point, international roster spots.
Yeah.
They're going for it. Yeah. They feel like they have a team that can compete and get into the playoffs. I say this on this show all the time. Get your ass in the playoffs and see what happens. Or please proceed to the playoffs. Thank you for showing that off there. That beautiful, fantastic shirt.
Where can you get this shirt?
You can get that at the Jacks Rangers Show website, which is jacksrangers.com/store. Thank you for that. I appreciate that purchase. You're like the few, the proud that have purchased merchandise. I appreciate it. Where were we going with that? Oh yeah, I feel like they have a team that they feel like can get into the playoffs. And if you get into the playoffs, there's no reason why you can't win the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's what's happening. I don't think that they're like shunning their young American or Canadian talent. I just think that they are good enough to win the whole damn thing.
Phil, it's your show. I had to come on and give you a hard time a little bit.
That's fine. That's fine. I like it. I appreciate that. So what is your score prediction for the game, which is, once again, for the people paying attention, this is the Free Jacks versus DC that's happening later on this week.
Yeah, I think, and we talked about this, growing pains for Old Glory this season. Here's where I'll be hopeful here and say that they don't want to stare down an 0-3 hole to start the season. The home crowd behind them. I think DC keeps it close within 60, 65 minutes. And I think, New England escapes with a 28-25 New England. I think that's how it happens. Mm-hmm. That's just me being realistic and hopeful, looking at a 36-0 score to Austin right now. So
it's tough, man. I mean, I appreciate the loyalty and the heartfelt passion that you have for DC. I don't think it's going to be that close. In fact, I've got it on my T-shirt here. I think it's Jacks by 90. Baby.
Oh my goodness!
Just kidding. I'm going to say 14 points. I'm going to say 31-17. Good guys win, which is the Free Jacks, of course. Yeah, I mean, the part that kind of scares me a little bit is the Jacks have not played well down there.
It's
That's
true.
really my only concern, to be honest with you. I think if you're looking up and down both of these rosters, I think we have more depth. I think we have better starters. So as long as we go down there and execute the way that we can, I think we come away with a win. That's been the problem though for the Free Jacks last year. Now, obviously, this year starting out going down to Lola for the first game, we looked great. So maybe we
Yeah.
climbed over that hill essentially of having bad outings in away games. I'm hoping that that's the case because we will need to win away games to get into the playoffs. I think we'll be fine at home, but the away games are a big question mark.
You know what? You bring up a good point. I was pleasantly surprised at how well New England played going on the road against NOLA. In fact, I I had NOLA winning that game. I had NOLA winning by 3, so it was kind of a pick 'em. I gave him the whole field advantage, knowing that it's tough to travel and win on the road. But I was impressed performance by New England. I got to ask you though, how do you feel about New England having a very early bye and then they've got the rest of the season, and coming out of a bye, right? Like, can you kick it up right away like that? And those are a couple of things that might play in the favor of Old Glory that can keep it close. And maybe at the end of there's 5-10 minutes, if they're within 5-6-7 points, they have a shot at it. So that's where I'm going.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking about that on the way down to Connecticut to the rugby showcase down there for high school rugby I went to today. I was like, is this a bad time for a bye? And what are they going to look like? I think a lot of teams last year, if I recall correctly, I don't have the stats in front of me. I'm not a stats guy, but I feel like a lot of teams lost the game that they came out of the bye from. And that's slightly scary to me. So it's something to think about for sure. I think they'll be fine ultimately, but if they start looking bad in that game, I'm going to be thinking about this conversation that we just had.
Well, honestly though, if you're New England and you got your sets, your sights set on getting in the playoffs and winning the Shield, you don't go down and lose a game like this, right? This is a game that you should. Granted, anything can happen in 80 minutes of rugby, but this is a game you should go down and you should expect to win. You should play well, and you get the heck out of there. You know what I mean? So they shouldn't lose this game, but anything can happen. And, maybe Old Glory surprises everyone. And then I'd love to hear what your next episode is going to sound like.
Yeah, I mean, we try not to be doom and gloom here, but we'll tell it how it is. We'll put a positive spin on it, of course, because we want to find out what the issues are. Not, our team sucks, that type of thing. We're fans first and foremost, and we love this team. So yeah, but we'll have question marks for sure. If they go down there and lay an egg against this DC team, I'll have some questions because we believe that this team is a contender. Not just me, but the fan base, and I think the front staff does too. Look at the moves that they're making. So if they go down there and lose a DC, there'll be question marks for sure to answer.
Yeah, I bumped them up in the power rankings, so
I appreciate that. Yeah. So a lot of people that were going to be watching this probably gave you a hard time about being 8 out of 13.
Loved it.
So our fan base is very engaging, and we're very passionate people up here in New England, man, for sure. Let's talk about, I'm going to open the floor here. Why should the Rangers, the Free Jacks fans in general, subscribe to Rugby Morning?
Yeah, I think simply if you want a quick and easy way to stay informed on rugby news with an American point of view, then sign up for the free newsletter. It's something you can read each day in under 5 minutes. In fact, a funny story, I have one of the readers, he coaches for a prominent touring side down south. He tells me that he reads the email every morning after his morning coffee.
Nice.
On the can. I said, okay, I don't care where you read it, so long as you read it. But and then on the social side, we don't take ourselves seriously. You see how I like to interact with folks on social, particularly with the MLR power rankings. It was awesome to hear from Free Jacks fans and listeners and followers of Jacks Rangers. And look, I post my picks, my wins, losses. I had a terrible record last week, but I threw it up there and said, hey, let's go. You know what I mean? So, come along for the ride because it's fun and stay informed. And, that's what Rugby Morning is. Rugby fan made easy.
Yeah, in all seriousness, I think it's fantastic. I'm the same way. I read it every single day. It keeps me up to date about every single thing that I need to know about with rugby. It's all right there. It's curated very well, and I just think it's fantastic. And it's free, guys. It's not like there's no charge. There's no fee here. It's just it's keeping us well informed as rugby fans here in the United States. And I think it does a fantastic job. So
Appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Kudos to that. So I've got one thing here before we get out of here. It's called one word association. So this is
Yes.
it's going to be a surprise. All right. Okay. So the first one here is District of Columbia.
District of Columbia. What I think power.
Okay.
Because you got the nation's capital. Wait, am I supposed to be answering one word or?
Yeah. It's just one word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Power.
Power. I love that. That's a great answer. So rugby morning.
Fun. It's
Yes,
fun.
I agree. Bill Baker.
I enjoy doing it. Bill Baker. OG.
Yes.
Because he's the original gangster when it came to following Eagles overseas. OG.
I agree. Free Jacks.
Frenemies.
I guess that's technically true.
Passionate.
There you
as
go.
I found out this last week.
Yeah.
The Free Jacks fan base passionate.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Power rankings.
Silly. That's silly. There's no science behind it. It's just silliness. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of science behind it, but it's silly.
Free Jacks, or excuse me, I've already said that one. Jacks Rangers. Sorry.
One word. Just a good old time.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because you guys are very formative, knowledgeable about your team. You love the sport of rugby. You love mixing it up with people. That's what rugby's about. You bring some interesting folks together.
For sure.
Just a good old time. I'm gonna use a phrase.
That's fine. Perfectly fine. John, I appreciate this. This has been fantastic. You've been very gracious with your time. Your team is playing right now, so thank you for coming on here and surviving the gauntlet that is the Jacks Rangers show. We'll have you on again talking about DC, I'm sure. This has been awesome. I appreciate you very much.
Good stuff. Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.